On my wedding day, I stood in my custom gown, staring at 12 completely empty chairs in the front row. Not a single family member showed up. Not my mother, not my aunts, not even my father who had promised to walk me down the aisle. They all abandoned me to attend my sister's baby shower on the exact same day. The next morning, I posted one single photo on my social media account. Within an hour, I had over 99 missed calls and panicked text messages. Before I tell you how I turned their ultimate betrayal into my sweetest victory, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to cut toxic people out of your life to protect your peace. My name is Vanessa. I am 33 years old, and I have spent my entire life playing the background character in my family's theatrical production. But nothing could have prepared me for the complete devastation they orchestrated on the day I married the love of my life. The afternoon began beautifully. Liam and I had chosen a stunning, understated venue in downtown Chicago. It was a historic building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, exposing the urban beauty we both loved. The space was filled with white roses, soft candlelight, and the gentle hum of a string quartet warming up. Everything was perfect. Everything except the glaring void on the left side of the aisle. I was standing in the bridal suite, hidden away from the arriving guests, but I had a clear view of the ceremony space through a small crack in the heavy wooden doors. The right side of the aisle was packed. Liam's family had flown in from all over the country. His parents were mingling happily with our mutual friends, former college roommates, and neighbors. They were laughing and taking pictures, creating a warm atmosphere of genuine celebration. But the left side, the side reserved for my family, was a ghost town. 12 chairs sat in the very front row, perfectly aligned with customized name cards resting on the velvet cushions. Richard and Patricia. My parents. Brittany and Chad. My younger sister and her husband. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had RSVP'd yes months ago. The chairs remained completely empty. My wedding planner, a highly organized woman named Claire, checked her watch for the fourth time in 10 minutes. Her professional smile was starting to crack at the edges. She stepped into the bridal suite holding her clipboard tightly to her chest. Vanessa. We are 15 minutes away from the procession, she said, her voice deliberately calm. I have tried calling your father and your mother, but both of their phones are going straight to voicemail. Do you want me to hold the start time for another 10 minutes? I shook my head slowly, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. No, do not hold it, I replied. They promised they would be here early for family portraits. They knew the schedule. I paced the length of the bridal suite, the heavy silk of my gown rustling against the hardwood floor. My mind raced through a dozen different catastrophic scenarios. Maybe there was a massive pileup on the interstate. Maybe their car had broken down. Maybe there had been a medical emergency. I refused to let my mind go to the most likely conclusion because the truth was too painful to accept on my wedding day. My parents had always been status-obsessed, constantly prioritizing appearances over genuine connection. My younger sister Brittany was their golden child. At 30 years old, she was a lifestyle influencer whose entire existence was funded by my parents and her husband Chad. Chad was a boastful tech startup founder who loved throwing money around to look successful. My parents adored them. They enabled Brittany's constant need for attention and treated Chad like the son they never had. I was the reliable one, the independent daughter they never had to worry about. They thought I was just a struggling event coordinator barely making ends meet in the city. They had no idea I was actually the founder of a highly exclusive multi-million-dollar boutique hospitality group. I kept my wealth entirely hidden from them because I knew exactly how they operated. If they knew I had money, they would have demanded I fund Chad's failing business ventures or pay for Brittany's lavish lifestyle. I stopped pacing and picked up my phone from the vanity table. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I opened my messages and saw nothing. No missed calls, no updates, no apologies for running late. Just an eerie silent void from the people who were supposed to love me most. 5 minutes passed. The string quartet started playing the prelude music, signaling to the guests that the ceremony was about to begin. The dull roar of conversation in the main hall quieted down. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, a loud rhythmic thud that made me feel dizzy. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. I practically lunged to unlock the screen, expecting a frantic apology from my mother about terrible traffic or a flat tire. Instead, I saw a text message from my father. I read the words once, then I read them again. My brain refused to process the information on the screen. The text was so casually cruel, so dismissively brief that it felt like a physical blow to my chest. "We are so sorry, Vanessa," my father wrote. Brittany started having some severe pregnancy anxiety this morning. She was crying and feeling very overwhelmed about the baby. Chad arranged a last-minute surprise baby shower today to cheer her up and surround her with support. We really cannot miss it. She needs her family right now. You and Liam are already practically married anyway since you live together. Have a great day and we will celebrate with you eventually. I stopped breathing. The air simply left my lungs and I stood frozen in the center of the bridal suite staring at the glowing screen. They were not stuck in traffic. They were not in the hospital. They had not gotten lost on the way to the venue. They had consciously, deliberately chosen to skip my wedding, to attend a baby shower for a woman who was perfectly healthy. My father, the man who had hugged me 2 weeks ago and promised he would be honored to walk me down the aisle, had abandoned me via text message exactly 15 minutes before the ceremony. A surprise baby shower. The phrase echoed in my mind, mocking me. You do not just throw together a surprise baby shower on a Saturday morning. You do not gather 12 extended family members, cater food, and secure a location on a whim because someone feels anxious. This was planned. This was premeditated. Brittany had known exactly what she was doing. She could not stand the fact that for one single day, the attention of the family would be focused on me instead of her. She could not handle sharing the spotlight. So she had orchestrated an emotional crisis, playing the fragile pregnant woman to force my parents to choose between us. And they had chosen her, just like they always did. I let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. The sheer audacity of the text message left me reeling. They actually thought this was an acceptable excuse. They genuinely believed that Brittany's need for a party was more important than their eldest daughter's wedding. Have a great day. He had literally typed, "Have a great day," while destroying the most important day of my life. My best friend and maid of honor walked into the suite adjusting her dress. She took one look at my face and rushed over. "Vanessa, what is wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with panic. "Are you okay? You look like you are going to be sick." I could not speak. I simply handed her the phone. I watched her eyes scan the screen. I watched her expression shift from concern to absolute pure outrage. Her jaw dropped and she looked up at me with tears welling in her eyes. "They are not coming," she whispered. "They went to a baby shower." I nodded slowly, the numbness finally giving way to a sharp, burning anger. My entire body felt like it was vibrating. They abandoned me. My dad promised he would walk me down the aisle. He bought a new suit. He told Liam he was proud to welcome him to the family. It was all a lie. My best friend wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace, being careful not to crush my gown. "I am so sorry, Vanessa. This is unforgivable. This is pure evil. What do you want to do? Do you want me to go out there and tell the planner to delay? Do you want to call them?" I pulled back, taking a deep, shaky breath. A part of me wanted to collapse onto the floor and cry until I could not breathe. A part of me wanted to cancel the whole thing, send the guests home, and hide under the covers for a month. But another part of me, the part that had built a massive company from scratch, the part that had learned to survive their emotional neglect for 33 years, recognized the trap they had set. Brittany wanted me to cancel. She wanted me to call her crying, begging them to come. She wanted the dramatic satisfaction of knowing she had ruined my wedding. If I broke down, I was giving her exactly what she wanted. "I need to see it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "See what?" my friend asked, wiping a tear from her own cheek. I grabbed my phone back from her hand. "I need to see what is so important that my family skipped my wedding. If Chad threw a surprise party today, Brittany will not be able to resist showing it off. She lives for the attention. She documents every second of her life. I opened my social media application and navigated directly to Brittany's profile. My thumb hovered over her profile picture, waiting for the truth to be revealed. I knew what I was about to see would hurt. I knew it would irrevocably destroy whatever fragile bond remained between me and my parents. But I needed to verify this so-called anxiety attack. I needed to see the lie with my own two eyes before I could close the door on my family forever. The string quartet outside transitioned into the bridal march. The music swelled, filling the venue with beautiful, haunting notes that signaled the beginning of my new life. I stood in the quiet suite, holding my phone, preparing to witness the ultimate betrayal. I tapped the glowing ring around her profile picture. The screen buffered for a fraction of a second before thrusting me into the middle of a massive, sunlit banquet hall. It was not a casual gathering. It was the grand ballroom at the Oak Brook Country Club, one of the most exclusive and expensive venues in the state. A live string quartet played cheerfully in the background. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated through a crowd of well-dressed guests, carrying silver trays of expensive appetizers. But the centerpiece was what made my blood run absolutely cold. A massive ice sculpture of a baby carriage sat on the main buffet table, flanked by custom-printed silk banners that read, "Welcome Baby Chad Jr." You do not order custom silk banners and a 6-foot ice sculpture on a Saturday morning because of a sudden anxiety attack. You order them months in advance. You put down non-refundable deposits. You coordinate with vendors. This event had been on their calendar for a very long time. My mother stepped into the frame holding a microphone. She beamed at the camera, her hair perfectly styled in an expensive updo that takes hours to complete at a salon. "We are just so blessed," she announced to the room, her voice echoing through the banquet hall. When Brittany told us she needed a special day to celebrate this miracle, we dropped absolutely everything, because our family always puts family first. I stared at the screen as my father stepped up beside her, handing Brittany a massive gift box wrapped in silver paper. He laughed his booming, familiar laugh, the exact one I had hoped to hear during his father of the bride speech today. He hugged Brittany, kissing her cheek while she performed a flawless routine of wiping away fake happy tears. I felt physically sick. The betrayal was so absolute, so carefully and maliciously orchestrated, that it defied all logic. They had planned this for months, knowing it was the exact date and time of my wedding. They had RSVP'd to my caterer, chosen their dinner options, and smiled in my face, all while secretly funding a rival event designed specifically to humiliate me. They wanted me to stand at the altar and realize I meant absolutely nothing to them. The heavy wooden door to the bridal suite opened slowly. Liam stood there in his tailored black tuxedo, looking handsome and incredibly worried. "The coordinator said you told her not to hold the music," he said, his voice soft and careful. "But you are not out there. Are you having second thoughts?" I could not hide it. I did not want to. I turned the phone toward him, the live stream still playing, the sound of my family cheering for Brittany filling the quiet bridal suite. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He took the phone from my shaking hands and looked at the screen. Then he read the text message from my father. I watched his jaw clench. The muscles in his neck tightened as the reality of what they had done washed over him. He did not yell. He did not curse. He did not ask me if I had done something to provoke them. Instead, he set the phone face down on the vanity table, shutting off the sound of their laughter. He took both of my hands in his. His grip was warm and steady, grounding me in the present moment, pulling me out of the spiral of rejection. "Vanessa," he said, looking directly into my eyes, "they do not define your worth. They never did. I know it hurts, but look at what they are missing. They are missing the chance to see the most incredible, brilliant woman I have ever known walk down the aisle." I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened to ruin my makeup. "It is just so cruel, Liam. Why do they hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve this?" "They do not hate you," he replied firmly, his thumbs gently tracing the backs of my hands. "They are intimidated by you. You do not need them to pay your bills. You do not need them to validate your existence. You are entirely self-made, and that terrifies people who only know how to control others through money and guilt. They wanted to break you today to prove they still have power over you. Do you want to cancel the reception? We can send everyone home. We can go to a hotel and just be together. I will handle all the announcements. You do not have to face anyone if you do not want to." I looked at his kind face. This was the face of the man who had stood by me while I built my company from a single laptop in a cramped apartment. The man who celebrated my late-night victories and brought me coffee when I was stressed over property acquisitions. The man who actually knew the real me, the successful, wealthy-driven woman my family refused to see. "No," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "I am not letting them take this day from me. Brittany wants me to cancel. She wants to be the victim who had to comfort her devastated sister. She wants me to call her crying and begging for an explanation. I am not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction." Liam smiled, a genuine proud smile that reached his eyes. "Then let us go get married." We walked out of the bridal suite together. There was no father to give me away, and I realized with absolute clarity that I did not need one. I was not a piece of property being handed from one man to another. I was an independent woman walking into a partnership with my equal. When the doors opened to the main hall, the guests stood and turned toward us. There was a brief, noticeable moment of confusion as people registered the empty front row on the left side. But Liam squeezed my hand and we walked down the aisle side by side, heads held high. We passed our friends, our colleagues, the people who had actually supported us through the years. My college roommate wiped a tear from her eye. My lead acquisition manager gave me a huge, supportive smile. The mentors who had guided my career beamed with pride. This was my real family, the family I had chosen. The ceremony was incredibly beautiful. The officiant spoke about resilience and partnership, and every word resonated deeply. When we exchanged our vows, I did not look at the empty chairs. I looked only at Liam. I promised to choose him every day, just as he had chosen me. The reception that followed was nothing short of magical. We ate incredible food, we danced until our feet hurt, and we surrounded ourselves with genuine, unconditional love. By the time the night ended, the sharp pain of my parents' betrayal had been replaced by a fierce, protective joy. We had won. We had survived their worst calculated attack, and we were still standing stronger than ever. It was past midnight when we finally climbed into the back of the black town car waiting to take us to O'Hare International Airport. Our bags were already loaded in the trunk. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as I leaned my head against Liam's shoulder, letting the pure exhaustion of the day finally wash over me. We had a long flight ahead of us, heading to the Maldives for a 3-week honeymoon. As we merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed inside my clutch purse. I had kept it on silent all night, refusing to let any late messages or fake apologies from my family ruin the reception. I pulled it out, intending to turn it off completely for the long flight. But a news alert from a financial networking application caught my eye. It was an automated notification tracking local Chicago tech startups, a habit I kept up for my own investment portfolios. I opened the application and read the headline. Chicago-based tech founder Chad Miller issues public plea for angel investors following major funding withdrawal. I sat up straight, my fatigue instantly vanishing. I tapped the article. It detailed how Chad's highly publicized software company had just lost its primary venture capital backing due to missed deadlines and poor financial management. The article included a desperate quote from Chad himself, posted on his professional networking profile, begging for luxury hospitality investors to save his sinking brand. He claimed his company was perfectly positioned to revolutionize high-end resort management and needed just one visionary investor to keep the doors open. I read the words again, letting the sheer beautiful irony of the situation wash over me. My arrogant brother-in-law, the man who had helped orchestrate the sabotage of my wedding today, was publicly begging for a hospitality investor to save him from complete bankruptcy. He was tagging luxury resort brands, pleading for a lifeline. He had absolutely no idea that the sister-in-law he had just humiliated was the founder and CEO of one of the most exclusive hospitality acquisition firms in the world. He was begging for money in the exact industry that I dominated. I felt a slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across my face. I reached down to my carry-on bag at my feet and pulled out my laptop. Liam looked over at me, raising an eyebrow. Working on our honeymoon? He asked with a soft, knowing laugh. I opened the screen, the glowing light illuminating the dark back seat of the car. Not working, I replied, my smile widening into a grin. Just doing a little family research. Just doing a little family research. The words hung in the quiet interior of the town car as we glided toward the airport. A few hours later, the biting chill of the Chicago night gave way to the pristine climate-controlled luxury of our first-class cabin. We were ensconced in our own private double suite aboard an international flight heading across the world to the Maldives. The flight attendant poured us 2 glasses of vintage champagne before discreetly sliding our privacy doors shut. The soft ambient lighting of the cabin cast a warm glow over the space. We were finally untouchable. Or so I thought. We reached cruising altitude and my phone automatically connected to the in-flight wireless network. It vibrated violently against the polished mahogany tray table. A notification flashed across the screen. It was the family group chat, a thread I had kept muted for months, but had unmuted this morning in a foolish moment of hope. The notification stared up at me. Mom. I set down my champagne flute. The crystal clinked softly against the table. I stared at the screen. Liam noticed the shift in my posture immediately. He reached across the wide armrest and gently tapped my hand. What is it? He asked, his voice low and steady. Did they realize what they did? I swiped the notification to open the message. My eyes scanned the text. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my throat. It was not a laugh of amusement. It was the sound of a woman realizing the absolute bottomless depth of her family's delusion. You are not going to believe this, I said, handing the phone across the console to Liam. Read it out loud. I need to hear it in a different voice to make sure I am not hallucinating. Liam took the phone. His eyes narrowed as he read the screen. He adjusted his position, sitting up straighter, his brow furrowed in deep disbelief. Vanessa, he read aloud, mimicking my mother's signature passive-aggressive tone. Since you decided not to make an appearance at Brittany's shower today, the least you could do is arrange to have a gift sent over. She is very stressed about the baby, and your silent treatment is incredibly selfish right now. Chad found a beautiful designer nursery set that costs $3,000. We expect you to contribute to it to make amends for missing the family celebration today. Let me know when you have transferred the money. Liam stopped reading and dropped the phone onto the tray table as if it were contaminated. He looked at me, his jaw tight with anger. Make amends, he repeated, his voice dripping with disgust. They skip your wedding, the most important day of your life, to go eat catered sandwiches, and now they want you to fund a $3,000 nursery set to apologize to them. I leaned back against the plush leather seat and closed my eyes. The audacity was almost poetic in its predictability. It was the exact same playbook they had used my entire life. Every time they wronged me, they immediately positioned themselves as the victims who were owed compensation. It is the college fund all over again, I said, my voice quiet but laced with cold steel. Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. Do not remind me. Every time I think about that, I want to fly back to Chicago and have a very unpleasant conversation with your father. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling of the cabin. When I was 18, I had worked double shifts at a diner to save up for my freshman year at State College. My parents had promised to match whatever I saved. They opened a joint account for me. I put every single dollar I earned into it. I missed school dances. I missed weekend trips with friends, all to secure my future. And then 2 months before tuition was due, the money vanished. I remember confronting my father in his home office. I told Liam, the memory replaying vividly in my mind. He was polishing his golf clubs. He did not even look at me when he said it. He just casually mentioned that Brittany needed a reliable car for her high school internships. They had taken my entire college fund, my blood, sweat, and tears to buy her a brand new European sports car. And what did your mother say? Liam asked, though he already knew the story. He asked it because he knew I needed to say it out loud. She told me I was being dramatic, I replied. She said Brittany needed to project an image of success to get into a good sorority. She looked me dead in the eye and said, Vanessa, you are so practical. You can always take out loans. But Brittany is delicate. She needs a proper start. My future was disposable. Brittany's image was essential. Liam reached over and took my hand. his thumb rubbing soothingly over my new wedding band. And look where that got them. You built an empire entirely on your own. An empire they think is a joke, I reminded him. I turned my head to look out the window at the dark expanse of the ocean below us. Think about last Thanksgiving. I had just closed the deal on the Aspen property. I was exhausted, but so incredibly proud. I tried to tell them about the expansion. I tried to share just a tiny piece of my world. Liam scoffed. I remember. Your dad interrupted you right in the middle of your sentence. Yes, I said, turning back to him. He interrupted me to ask Chad how his groundbreaking application was going. Chad spent 45 minutes bragging about a software platform that did not even exist yet. And my father looked at me and said, Vanessa, you should really take notes from Chad. Event planning is a nice little hobby for a girl, but tech is where the real money is. Maybe if your party planning business takes off, you can cater one of Chad's corporate retreats someday. The memory burned, but the pain was different now. It was no longer the desperate ache of a daughter seeking validation. It was the cold analytical assessment of a businesswoman recognizing a bad investment. They actually believed it. I continued, my voice gathering momentum. They believed Chad was a genius. They took their entire retirement savings, Liam, every single penny they had tucked away for 30 years, and they handed it over to Chad to fund a vaporware startup that had no business model, no revenue stream, and no actual product. They thought they were buying their way into high society. Liam picked up my phone, which was still displaying the group chat. The screen had gone dark. He tapped it awake. So what is the plan, Mrs. CEO? Are we transferring $3,000 to the golden child to make amends for having the audacity to get married today? I looked at the phone. For 33 years, my instinct would have been to reply, to argue, to defend myself. I would have typed out paragraphs explaining how hurt I was, detailing the betrayal, begging them to see my perspective. I would have played right into their hands, giving them the drama and the reaction they craved. But the woman who boarded this flight was not the same woman who had stood crying in the bridal suite 12 hours ago. That woman was gone. I reached out and pressed the power button on the side of the phone, holding it down until the screen went completely black. No, I said, dropping the dead phone into the side pocket of my seat. I am not sending them a dime. I am not sending an angry text. I am not sending an explanation. They want a reaction. They want me to care. And the absolute worst thing I can do to them is to show them that I simply do not care anymore. Liam smiled, a slow, wicked smile that made my heart race. I love it when you go into corporate execution mode. I reached down into my leather carry-on tote resting at my feet. The bag was heavy, weighed down by the physical manifestation of my life's work. I dug past my makeup bag and my travel documents. My fingers found the cool, smooth leather of my business portfolio. I pulled it out and set it on the tray table between us. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. The portfolio was thick-bound in premium black leather. Embossed right in the center in understated silver foil was the crest of my holding company, Ethel Hospitality Group. Liam looked at the portfolio and then up at me. Are those the final acquisition papers? I nodded, running my hand over the silver-embossed logo. I brought them with me to review on the flight. Chad has been pitching his sinking company to my acquisition team for 6 straight months. He has been sending desperate emails begging for a meeting with the anonymous founder of Ethel Resorts. He thinks if he can secure a vendor contract with our properties, he can save his startup from total bankruptcy. He thinks an angel investor is going to swoop in and bail him out of his own incompetence. I unzipped the portfolio and opened it. Inside were hundreds of pages of financial disclosures, risk assessments, and property deeds. The very top document was a printed copy of Chad's frantic business proposal, heavily annotated with red ink by my chief financial officer. Next to it was the deed to the private island resort we were currently flying toward, the exact resort Chad was trying to leverage for his survival. My parents drained my college fund to buy Brittany's love, I said, my fingers tracing the red ink on Chad's failed proposal. They drained their own retirement to buy Chad's success. They bet everything on the golden child and the tech genius. I looked up at Liam, the reality of the situation crystallizing in my mind. And now the tech genius is bankrupt. The parents have no retirement left. And the only person who has the power to save them is the event planner they abandoned at the altar today. Liam picked his champagne glass back up. His eyes sparkled in the dim cabin light. To the event planner, he said, tapping his glass against mine, "May her parties always be legendary." To the event planner, I agreed, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the expensive champagne. I looked back down at the thick legal dossier. Chad's proposal stared up at me, full of hollow promises and desperate projections. My family had spent a lifetime treating me like I was invisible. They had pushed me aside, silenced me, and underestimated me at every single turn. But they were about to find out that when you force someone to live in the shadows, they learn exactly how to pull the strings. I leaned back into my seat, pulling the dossier onto my lap, and began to read. The game had officially changed, and I was the one holding all the cards. The remainder of the flight across the globe felt like a surreal transition between two entirely different lifetimes. I closed the heavy leather portfolio and slid it carefully back into my carry-on tote, leaving Chad's desperate financial projections hidden away in the dark. I reclined my seat into a fully flat bed and let my mind wander through the labyrinth of the past 7 years. The deception regarding my career had started as a simple boundary to protect my sanity, but it quickly evolved into a necessary survival strategy. When I bought my very first boutique hotel property in upstate New York, I was only 26 years old. I had leveraged every single industry contact I made while working grueling late nights in corporate hospitality to secure the commercial financing. It was a massive, terrifying risk. But when I made the mistake of sharing my preliminary business plan with my parents during a rare Sunday dinner, my father had laughed right in my face. He told me I was playing a childish game of Monopoly with real money and advised me to stick to picking out table linens for corporate retreats. That was the exact moment I realized my family would never be a source of support. They would only ever be a liability. So I let them believe their own fabricated narrative. I let them call me a glorified party planner. I smiled and nodded politely when my mother asked if I was struggling to pay my rent or if I needed to borrow grocery money. Meanwhile, I was quietly acquiring distressed luxury properties across the globe, renovating them with brutal efficiency, and flipping them into highly exclusive destinations for the ultra-wealthy. Ethel Hospitality Group was born in the shadows of my family's low expectations. As my net worth climbed steadily from the low millions into the 9-figure range, the necessity of my secret became absolute. If my parents knew I possessed that kind of capital, they would have demanded I finance Chad's endless string of failed business ventures. They would have expected me to buy Brittany her dream mansion in the wealthy Chicago suburbs. I would have become their personal limitless bank account. Hiding my wealth was never about greed. It was about protecting the empire I built with my own 2 hands from people who only knew how to take. The gentle chime of the cabin intercom pulled me from my thoughts as the captain announced our initial descent. We had transferred in Dubai, moving seamlessly from the commercial first-class terminal to a private charter service I had arranged months ago. The final leg of our journey was a flight over the crystalline waters of the Indian Ocean. Liam and I sat in the plush seats of the Twin Otter seaplane, watching the scattered atolls emerge from the deep blue sea like emeralds dropped on glass. The bitter exhaustion of the wedding day drama melted away, replaced by the familiar electric thrill of inspecting a new property. Ethel Island Resort was my absolute crown jewel. I had finalized the acquisition just 8 months ago, purchasing the private island from a bankrupt European developer who lacked the vision to execute the project. We had spent tens of millions completely overhauling the infrastructure, upgrading the overwater villas to meet strict ultra-luxury standards, and retraining the entire hospitality staff. This was my very first time visiting the property since the extensive renovations were completed and the resort was officially open to the public. As the seaplane banked sharply to the left, the island came into full, breathtaking view. A crescent of pure white sand hugged a turquoise lagoon dotted with 50 private villas stretching out over the water on beautifully curved wooden boardwalks. The thatched roofs gleamed under the bright tropical sun. The seaplane touched down smoothly on the water, sending a spray of white foam against the windows before taxiing slowly toward the arrival pavilion. A pristine line of staff members stood waiting on the polished teak dock, dressed in crisp white linen uniforms. At the center of the group stood Oliver, the seasoned general manager I had personally poached from a competing luxury brand in Bora Bora. The propellers spun to a halt, and the CO pilot opened the cabin door, letting in the warm, fragrant ocean breeze. Liam stepped out first, offering me his hand. As my sandals touched the wooden dock, the entire welcome committee stood at attention. Oliver stepped forward, a broad, welcoming smile illuminating his face. He did not offer me a generic greeting reserved for wealthy honeymooners. He did not hand me a complimentary welcome cocktail or offer to carry my bags to the reception desk. Instead, he extended his hand for a firm professional handshake. "Welcome to Ethel Island, Madam CEO," he said, his voice carrying a note of deep, genuine respect. The renovations were completed precisely on schedule, and the third quarter revenue projections are already exceeding your initial targets. It is an absolute honor to finally have you on site. "Thank you, Oliver," I replied, returning his handshake with equal firmness. "The property looks spectacular from the air. I am looking forward to reviewing the ground operations with you tomorrow morning, but today my husband and I are strictly off the clock." Oliver nodded graciously, motioning toward a sleek electric golf cart waiting at the end of the pier. "Of course, Vanessa. We have prepared the primary owner's estate for you. Absolute privacy and a dedicated staff standing by for whatever you might need during your stay." Liam leaned close to my ear as we walked toward the cart. I have to admit, he whispered, a wicked smile playing on his lips. "Watching you operate in full boss mode is incredibly attractive." I laughed, feeling the last lingering remnants of Chicago tension evaporate in the tropical heat. The owner's estate was situated at the furthest edge of the island, completely isolated from the guest villas by a thick grove of lush palm trees. It was a massive, sprawling compound with its own private infinity pool, a sunken glass-bottomed lounge area, and a grand wooden staircase leading straight down into the vibrant coral reef. We walked through the heavy double doors into a living space that defined understated wealth. I left my bags by the entrance and walked straight out onto the expansive wooden deck, letting the ocean breeze wash over me. It was absolute paradise, and it was entirely mine. After a long shower and a plate of fresh tropical fruit delivered by our private butler, I sat down on the plush outdoor sofa and opened my laptop. The sound of the waves gently lapping against the wooden stilts of the villa provided the perfect background noise for what I was about to do. I logged into my encrypted corporate email account and searched the inbox for Chad's name. A long, pathetic list of emails immediately populated the screen. He had been absolutely relentless. For the past 6 months, my arrogant brother-in-law had been desperately trying to secure a meeting with the anonymous holding company that owned Ethel Resorts. His tech startup promised to revolutionize guest services through automated concierge applications. In reality, his software was buggy, deeply flawed, and completely useless to a high-touch luxury brand that prided itself on personalized human interaction. But Chad did not care about the quality of his product. He only cared about saving his sinking ship and preserving his image as a successful entrepreneur. I opened his most recent email, sent just 3 days before he helped sabotage my wedding. The subject line read, "Urgent partnership opportunity with industry innovator." I scoffed aloud, reading through his arrogant pitch. He spoke about himself as if he were the next great tech visionary, offering my company the rare privilege of investing in his platform. He used ridiculous buzzwords, talking about leveraging synergy and creating a disruptive paradigm shift in the hospitality sector. He promised that aligning with his brand would bring Ethel Resorts into the modern era. Attached to the email was a desperate plea disguised as a confident business proposal asking for a multi-million-dollar vendor contract that would effectively bail out his failing company. He was drowning in debt, unable to secure traditional venture capital from anyone in Chicago, and he viewed my mystery holding company as his ultimate financial lifeline. I sat on the deck of my resort staring at the desperate words of the man who had stolen my family's attention on my wedding day. Chad thought he was playing the role of a successful mogul at his country club baby shower. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that the very person he had humiliated, the sister-in-law he had mocked and discarded, was the anonymous CEO he was currently begging for financial salvation. He had handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy his carefully curated illusion of success. I closed the email and looked out at the endless horizon of the Indian Ocean. My family had made their choice. They chose the illusion of Brittany and Chad over the reality of my loyalty. Now it was time for me to make my choice. I held his entire professional future in my hands, and I was going to use it. I closed the email application on my laptop and let the screen go dark. The reflection of the Indian Ocean stared back at me in the black glass. Liam stepped out onto the massive wooden deck carrying 2 fresh towels and wearing a relaxed smile. He looked completely at ease in the tropical heat, a stark contrast to the stiff, suffocating atmosphere of the Chicago wedding venue we had fled just 24 hours ago. "This villa costs $20,000 a night to rent," I told him, leaning back against the plush cushions of the outdoor sofa. "It has a private wine cellar, a sunken glass viewing floor to watch the manta rays, and a dedicated staff of 4. And Chad thinks he can buy his way into this level of luxury by offering me an automated text messaging concierge service that looks like it was coded by a high school student in a basement." Liam chuckled and draped a towel over the back of a teak lounge chair. He walked over and stood behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. His touch was grounding. "The man is drowning, Vanessa. He is grasping at luxury brands because he thinks associating with wealth will somehow magically generate wealth for himself. Have you decided how you are going to reply to his email?" I shook my head and closed the laptop completely. "I am not going to reply to his email at all," I said. "Replying to a business proposal is a private transaction. If I reject him privately, he will just spin the narrative. He will tell my parents that the anonymous CEO of Ethel Resorts was too intimidated by his genius to partner with him. He will twist the rejection into a badge of honor, and my parents will eagerly swallow every single lie. They will write him another check from their dwindling retirement fund to keep his illusion alive." I stood up and turned to face my husband. "Private rejections allow liars to rewrite history," I explained, feeling the adrenaline surge through my veins. "I need a public execution. I need to dismantle his entire facade in a space where he cannot hide behind his smooth-talking startup founder persona. I need my family to see exactly who they chose over me and exactly what they threw away." Liam raised an eyebrow, a spark of dangerous amusement lighting up his eyes. "A public execution requires an audience. How do you plan to gather the crowd?" I picked up my phone from the table. The screen was still blank, notifications completely silenced. "We use the one thing they care about more than anything else in the world," I said. "We use their precious social media." Brittany built her entire fake influencer career on Instagram. Chad uses his profile to lure in gullible angel investors by posting pictures of leased sports cars and rented watches. Their entire self-worth is tied to their online perception. So we strike them right where they live. I walked to the edge of the infinity pool that blended seamlessly into the turquoise lagoon below. The lighting right now is absolutely perfect. The golden hour is hitting the water, and the private yachts anchored in the distance look like props on a movie set. "Go put on that linen button-down shirt I bought you for the trip. We are going to take a photo." Liam did not ask any questions. He knew exactly what I was doing. He disappeared into the massive master suite and returned 5 minutes later looking effortlessly handsome and perfectly suited for the ultra-wealthy backdrop. I smoothed down my own silk resort dress, adjusting the fabric so it caught the gentle ocean breeze. I wanted to look exactly like what I was. A powerful, unbothered woman who owned the very ground she stood on. We stood together on the edge of the balcony. I held my phone out, framing the shot meticulously. I made sure to capture the sprawling architecture of the owner's estate behind us. The unmistakable thatched roof design, the private wraparound pool, and the personalized Ethel Island crest etched into the frosted glass of the balcony barrier. There was no mistaking where we were. Anyone who followed luxury travel or high-end real estate would instantly recognize the $20,000 a night flagship property. I snapped a dozen photos. We were not posing like stiff traditional newlyweds. We looked relaxed, powerful, and deeply in love. In the best shot, Liam was looking at me with pure adoration, while I stared directly into the camera lens with a cool, challenging smile. It was the face of a woman who had just won a war no one else knew she was fighting. I sat back down on the outdoor sofa and opened the Instagram application. My profile had always been remarkably private. I kept a small curated list of followers, mostly close friends, industry mentors, and unfortunately my toxic family members. Brittany followed me only to monitor my life for signs of failure. Chad followed me because he obsessively tracked everyone in his social circle. My parents followed me out of some misplaced sense of obligation. They were all about to get a front row seat to reality. I uploaded the photo and applied a subtle filter to enhance the vibrant blues of the ocean. Then I tapped the caption box. I needed the words to be precise. I needed them to cut through the noise and strike directly at the core of their insecurities. I did not want to sound angry or bitter. I wanted to sound victorious and entirely indifferent to their existence. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard. Skip the family drama to celebrate our marriage at my newest property acquisition. Welcome to Ethel Island. I paused, staring at the text. It was good, but it needed the final nail in the coffin. It needed the absolute confirmation of my identity. I added the hashtags that would officially end Chad's career. Hashtag CEO, hashtag founder, hashtag Ethel Hospitality Group. Finally, I tagged the official location, placing a digital pin directly on the Ethel Island Resort, Maldives. I handed the phone to Liam, letting him read the caption. He let out a low whistle, shaking his head in sheer admiration. That is not just a public execution, Vanessa. That is a nuclear strike. When Chad realizes he has been begging his sister-in-law for a bailout for 6 months, his ego is going to spontaneously combust. And when your parents realize the event planner they abandoned at the altar owns an international chain of luxury resorts, they are going to lose their minds. That is exactly the point, I said, taking the phone back. They wanted to humiliate me by prioritizing a catered baby shower over my wedding. They wanted to prove that Chad and Brittany were the successful ones. I am simply providing them with an updated financial portfolio. I looked at the clock at the top of my screen. It was late evening in the Maldives, which meant it was early morning in Chicago. My family would be waking up soon. They would be reaching for their phones, pouring their coffee, and checking their social media feeds to bask in the lingering glow of Brittany's extravagant country club shower. They would be expecting to see photos of themselves looking like the perfect affluent American family. Instead, they were going to see my face staring back at them from a private island I bought with cash. I took a deep breath, feeling a rush of pure adrenaline. I pressed the blue share button. The loading bar shot across the screen and the photo appeared at the very top of my feed. It was live. The trap was set and the bait was officially in the water. Now comes the best part, I said, my voice steady and resolute. I opened my phone settings and navigated to the application controls. I disabled the push notifications for Instagram. Then I disabled the notifications for my text messages and my incoming phone calls. I put the entire device into absolute do not disturb mode. I was not going to sit here anxiously watching the likes roll in or waiting for the angry text messages to populate my screen. I was going to let them stew in their own shock and horror. I tossed the silenced phone onto the nearest lounge chair, walking away from the digital chaos I had just unleashed upon Chicago. The sun was beginning to dip lower on the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of violet and crushed gold. The temperature was perfect. The ocean was completely calm. I walked over to the outdoor call button mounted on the teak pillar and pressed it once. Within 60 seconds, our private butler appeared at the edge of the deck wearing a crisp uniform and a polite smile. "Yes, Madam CEO?" he asked, bowing his head slightly. "How may I assist you this evening? Please bring us a bottle of the vintage Dom Perignon from the private reserve I requested, And 2 glasses. We are celebrating. Right away, madam. The butler disappeared like a ghost, leaving Liam and me alone again on the balcony. Liam pulled me into his arms, wrapping his hands around my waist and pressing a kiss to my forehead. You are absolutely terrifying. Sometimes he murmured against my hair. I am incredibly glad you are on my side. I wrapped my arms around his neck, resting my head against his chest. I listened to the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. For 33 years, my family had demanded I play the role of the quiet, struggling scapegoat. They had fed off my insecurity and used my supposed failures to elevate their own mediocre lives. They threw away my college fund, they mocked my ambitions, and they did not even have the basic decency to show up on the day I got married. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully broken me. But as I stood on the balcony of my $20,000 a night villa, waiting for the champagne to arrive, I felt nothing but absolute peace. The shockwave was traveling across the world right now, moving silently through fiber optic cables and satellite connections. It was heading straight for their perfectly curated suburban lives. All I had to do was sit back, drink my champagne, and wait for the explosion. I pictured Chad sitting in his overly expensive leased apartment, staring at his screen as the realization washed over him. I pictured the exact moment his arrogant smirk would drop, transforming into pure visceral panic as he realized the anonymous billionaire he had been relentlessly begging for money was the sister-in-law he had just intentionally humiliated. I imagined my mother, Patricia, dropping her morning coffee, spilling it all over her expensive kitchen rug as she read the words "newest property acquisition." The silence from my phone was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The champagne arrived resting in a silver bucket beaded with condensation. The butler poured the sparkling liquid with practiced elegance and bowed before retreating into the shadows. I picked up my glass and handed the other to Liam. We stepped up to the edge of the glass barrier, watching the Indian Ocean swallow the last light of the sun. The trap had been flawlessly executed. The devastation in Chicago was imminent, and I was finally entirely free. We let exactly 45 minutes pass. I wanted the reality of the situation to fully marinate in their minds. I wanted the initial shock of the photograph to wear off and the cold, hard panic to set in. Liam and I finished our first glass of champagne watching the sky turn from violet to a deep velvety black, speckled with a million brilliant stars. The warm ocean breeze wrapped around us, providing a stark, beautiful contrast to the icy digital storm I had just unleashed on my relatives in Chicago. When the champagne bottle was half empty, I finally stood up and walked back to the lounge chair where my phone was resting. It looked completely innocent lying there on the plush white cushion. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal in my hand, and swiped down from the top right corner of the screen. I tapped the crescent moon icon, disabling the Do Not Disturb mode. The phone immediately seized in my hand. It vibrated so violently and continuously that it almost slipped from my fingers. The screen illuminated with a blinding cascade of notifications piling up faster than the processor could register them. It was a digital avalanche. The little red notification bubbles on my messaging and calling applications instantly maxed out. I stared at the screen, taking in the sheer volume of their panic. 99 plus missed calls, 99 plus text messages, 24 new voicemails. I walked back to the glass railing of the balcony and held the phone out so Liam could see the screen. He let out a low whistle of pure astonishment. "They are losing their minds," he said, taking another sip of his champagne. "Who is the top offender on the call log?" I scrolled down the list of missed calls. 42 missed calls from my mother Patricia, 38 from my father Richard, 15 from Brittany, and a staggering 27 missed calls from Chad. My arrogant tech genius brother-in-law had spent the last 45 minutes frantically dialing my number over and over again. "Let us start with Chad," I said, tapping into my text messages. "I want to see the exact stages of a narcissistic collapse in real time." I opened Chad's message thread. He had sent 18 rapid-fire text messages. I read them chronologically, starting from the moment my Instagram post had gone live. The progression of his tone was an absolute masterpiece of psychological destruction. His first text was sent exactly 2 minutes after my post. It read, "Very funny, Vanessa. Did you sneak onto a restricted luxury property just for clout? You are going to get arrested." His second text arrived 5 minutes later. The arrogance was starting to crack. "Wait, are you actually staying at Ethel Island? How on earth did you afford that? Liam does not make that kind of money." 10 minutes later, the panic began to set in. "Vanessa, answer your phone right now. I just showed your post to my lead investor." He recognized the owner's villa. "What are you doing there?" 15 minutes later, he had clearly opened his laptop and done what any desperate businessman would do. He checked the public records. His message read, "I just checked the corporate registry for Ethel Hospitality Group. The holding company is registered under a shell corporation linked to your maiden name. Is this some kind of sick prank? Tell me this is a joke, Vanessa." Then came the message I had been waiting for. The ultimate realization of his own impending doom. Sent just 10 minutes ago, the text radiated pure, unadulterated terror. "Wait. You own Ethel. I have been pitching to your holding company for 6 months. I sent my proprietary financial data to your executive team. Why didn't you tell me?" The final string of texts abandoned all pretense of pride or arrogance. He was begging. "Vanessa, please pick up the phone. You have to talk to me. My business is going under. My primary investors just pulled their funding this morning. I need that vendor contract with Ethel Resorts, or I am declaring bankruptcy on Monday. Please, Vanessa, we are family. Answer the phone." I read the messages out loud to Liam. When I finished reading the final plea, Liam actually laughed out loud, the sound carrying out over the dark water of the lagoon. "He just played the family card," Liam said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The man who convinced your parents to skip your wedding to attend a catered baby shower is now begging you to save his company because you are family. The delusion is truly spectacular." "It is exactly what I expected," I replied, locking my phone screen for a moment, to let the satisfaction wash over me. Chad built his entire identity on being the smartest, richest man in the room. He looked down on me for years because he thought I was just a lowly event planner. Now he realizes that the woman he humiliated is the only person on earth who can save him from total financial ruin, and he knows I am not going to throw him a life raft. I unlocked the phone again. Now let us see what my beloved sister has to say. I opened Brittany's text thread. Her messages were a chaotic mess of jealousy, entitlement, and rage. She had sent 7 texts, all in all capital letters. "How dare you try to ruin my baby shower day by posting fake millionaire photos? You are so jealous of my baby that you had to create a pathetic lie to steal my spotlight. Mom is having a panic attack in the country club bathroom because her friends are asking questions about your post. Take the post down right now, Vanessa. You are ruining my perfect day. You are such a bitter, toxic person." I sighed deeply, feeling a brief wave of exhaustion at her predictable behavior. Brittany was entirely incapable of viewing the world through any lens other than her own desperate need for attention. Confronted with undeniable proof of my success, her only reaction was fury that the country club ladies were talking about me instead of her pregnancy. She did not care that her husband was facing bankruptcy. She only cared that my Instagram post was getting more engagement than her ice sculpture. She is still clinging to the illusion I told Liam, deleting her text thread without a second thought. She refuses to accept the reality of the situation. Let her live in denial for a few more hours. The bank will come for her luxury cars soon enough. Finally, I opened the message thread from my mother, Patricia. This was the one I had been bracing myself for. I knew my mother's tactics better than anyone. She was a master manipulator capable of twisting any narrative to serve her own interests. I expected anger. I expected threats. I even expected a fake, tearful apology for missing the wedding. What I read instead was a level of audacity so breathtaking it actually left me speechless. I stared at the screen, my eyes wide. I read the long paragraph twice to make sure I was not misunderstanding her words. I let out a dry, hollow laugh and handed the phone back to Liam. "You have to read this one," I said, my voice trembling slightly with disbelief. "She does not even mention the wedding." Liam took the phone and cleared his throat. He read my mother's message aloud, his voice taking on a mocking theatrical tone. Vanessa, darling, what an absolutely wonderful surprise. Your father and I are so incredibly proud of our little entrepreneur. We always knew you had a knack for decorating and hospitality. This resort looks absolutely magnificent. The photos are stunning. Since we tragically missed your wedding festivities today due to Brittany's little health scare, we think it would be absolutely perfect for you to fly the whole family out there to see you. A celebration vacation for all of us. Have your executive assistant send us the private flight itineraries. We can be packed and ready by Tuesday morning. Love, Mom. Liam lowered the phone and stared at me. He looked genuinely horrified. She wants a free vacation, he stated flatly. She abandons you on your wedding day, lies about a health scare, and her immediate reaction to finding out you are a multimillionaire is to demand you fly them to a private island on a private jet. I took the phone from his hands. Yes, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She completely glossed over the fact that she broke my heart today. She did not offer a single word of genuine apology for leaving me at the altar. She just saw a $20,000 a night villa and immediately decided she was entitled to it. She thinks because I have money now, all is forgiven, and she can simply step back into my life to reap the benefits. She thinks she still has power over me. I continued, my fingers hovering over the digital keyboard. She thinks I am still that desperate little girl craving her approval. She thinks if she calls me a little entrepreneur, I will be so flattered that I will open my checkbook and fund a luxury vacation for the exact people who threw me away. So what do you say to that? Liam asked, watching me intently. I looked down at the bright screen. For my entire life, I had tried to explain my feelings to this woman. I had written long emotional letters. I had cried. I had begged for her to understand my perspective. I had wasted thousands of hours trying to construct the perfect sentences that would finally make her love me. But I finally understood the truth. Narcissists do not care about your feelings. They only care about your boundaries. And the most powerful boundary you can set is a total lack of emotional engagement. I was not going to explain my pain. I was not going to demand an apology for the wedding. I was going to shut the door in her face with brutal corporate efficiency. I tapped the text box and typed my response. I did not use a greeting. I did not use her name. I kept it to exactly 7 words. No space. We only host family. I hit the blue send arrow and watched the text bubble appear on the screen. It was delivered instantly. I did not block her number. I wanted her to be able to read those words over and over again. I wanted her to stare at that screen in the middle of the country club and realize that her access to me was permanently revoked. She had chosen her family today at the baby shower. I was simply confirming that I was no longer a part of it. I tossed the phone back onto the lounge chair. The screen went dark. Done, I said, picking up my champagne glass. Liam smiled, raising his glass to clink against mine. The crystal chimed clearly in the quiet night air. To the family we choose, he said softly. To the family we choose, I echoed. I took a sip of the cold, crisp champagne, looking out over the dark water. I knew the storm was raging in Chicago. I knew Chad was hyperventilating over his financial ruin, and my mother was throwing a tantrum over being denied her luxury vacation. But here on my island, thousands of miles away from their toxicity, there was only the sound of the ocean and the profound, beautiful silence of a woman who had finally set herself free. The fallout in Chicago began before the ice sculpture at the Oak Brook Country Club had even started to melt. Back in the grand ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to suffocating. The lavish baby shower my parents had funded to humiliate me was rapidly turning into their own personal nightmare. Word travels fast among the wealthy elite, and in the digital age, it travels instantly. Within an hour of my Instagram post going live, the whispers began rippling through the room. The women in their designer dresses and the men in their tailored suits were no longer looking at Brittany and her mountain of expensive gifts. They were looking at their phones. They were pulling up my profile, zooming in on the $20,000 a night villa, and reading the hashtags that declared me the sole founder and CEO of a hospitality empire. Margaret Vance, a notoriously gossipy woman whose husband ran a massive commercial real estate firm, was the first to approach my mother. Patricia was standing near the gift table, holding a glass of sparkling water, desperately trying to maintain her picture-perfect smile. Patricia Margaret said, her voice loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "I just saw the most incredible post online. I had no idea your Vanessa was the mystery buyer behind Ethel Island. My husband has been trying to find out who acquired that property for months. It was a massive cash deal. You must be so incredibly proud of her success." My mother froze. Her mind raced, attempting to process a reality she had actively denied for my entire adult life. She could not admit that she had no idea her daughter was a multimillionaire. She could not confess that she had just deliberately skipped the wedding of a global CEO to attend a baby shower for a struggling influencer. In the high society circles of Chicago, admitting that you were estranged from a highly successful child was social suicide. So my mother did what she always did. She lied. She pasted on a brilliant artificial smile and placed a hand elegantly over her heart. "Oh, Margaret, we are simply bursting with pride," my mother lied, her voice dripping with fake humility. We wanted to keep it quiet, to protect her privacy, of course. Richard and I have been her primary silent investors since day one. We provided the initial seed capital for her little business venture years ago. We practically built that company from the ground up with her. It is very much a family enterprise. My father Richard stood nearby, nodding sagely and playing the role of the proud, wealthy patriarch. "We always knew she had a good head for real estate," he chimed in, slipping his hands into his pockets. "We gave her the financial foundation she needed to fly." Standing just a few feet away, Chad heard every single word. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking physically ill. He knew my parents were lying. He knew this because my father had just taken out a secret second mortgage on their family home to help fund Chad's failing tech startup and to pay for this ridiculous baby shower. My parents were drowning in debt to keep up appearances, and yet here they were taking absolute credit for the empire I had built entirely on my own. Thousands of miles away in the Maldives, I woke up to a flawless tropical morning. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling glass doors of the owner's villa, reflecting off the turquoise lagoon. Liam and I were sitting on the deck enjoying a breakfast of fresh papaya pastries and Kona coffee. The digital storm I had unleashed the night before had run its course, leaving behind a trail of absolute devastation in my inbox. I picked up my phone to check the morning market updates. As I unlocked the screen, a call came through. It was my mother. After a lifetime of shrinking away from her calls, of feeling that familiar knot of anxiety twist in my stomach, I felt absolutely nothing. I took a sip of my coffee and swiped the green button to answer the call. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table between Liam and me. "Vanessa, darling." My mother's voice poured through the speaker, thick with an artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I am so glad I finally reached you. We have been trying to get through all night." I remained completely silent, letting the ambient sound of the ocean waves crashing against the stilts of the villa serve as my only response. I was not going to make this easy for her, too. My mother cleared her throat, slightly unnerved by the silence. "Listen, sweetheart," she continued, her tone shifting into her demanding, authoritative register. "Your father and I were talking this morning. We are getting a lot of questions from the country club board of directors about the Ethel Island property. Since this is a family business, and we gave you your start, we think it is only appropriate that we host a small gathering at the resort next month. Just the board members and a few key investors. You will need to arrange the owner's villa for us and comp the flights. It will be wonderful exposure for the brand." Liam paused with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth, raising his eyebrows at me in sheer disbelief. The sheer, unadulterated delusion of her demand was breathtaking. She had completely bypassed any apology for missing my wedding. She had ignored the fact that she had tried to ruin my life just yesterday. Instead, she was attempting to commandeer my multi-million-dollar property to impress her country club friends and solidify the lie she was currently spinning in Chicago. "A family business," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm and flat. "You think Ethel Hospitality Group is a family business?" "Well, of course it is." my mother replied quickly, a hint of nervousness bleeding through her arrogant tone. We raised you, Vanessa. We gave you the tools to succeed. And as your primary supporters, we have a right to enjoy the fruits of that success. It is about maintaining our social standing. You owe us this much after abandoning your family yesterday to run off to an island. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the teak table. The time for playing games was over. It was time for a surgical, precise dismantling of her entire reality. Let us talk about exactly what you gave me, Mother, I said, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Let us talk about August 12th, 10 years ago. I was 18 years old. I had been working double shifts at a diner for 3 years, saving every single dollar for my college tuition. The joint savings account had exactly $28,450 in it. My mother fell silent on the other end of the line. The fake sweetness instantly evaporated. You and Dad went to the bank on a Tuesday morning. I continued reciting the facts with cold mechanical precision. You withdrew the entire $28,450. You used my blood, sweat, and minimum wage tips to purchase a brand new BMW convertible for Brittany because she needed to look successful for her sorority rush week. You stole my future to fund her vanity. That was family money. My mother snapped, her voice defensive and shrill. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owed us that money for room and board. You were being selfish. I ignored her desperate attempt to rewrite history. Then there was my high school graduation. I pressed on. My grandparents left me a check for $7,200 to help me start my adult life. You intercepted the mail. You deposited that check into your own account and used it to pay the deposit on Chad's engagement ring because he was already broke before he even married my sister. You do not know what you are talking about. My mother stammered, panic finally taking hold. You are making things up to justify your bitter grudges. 3 years ago, I said, ignoring her protests, I came to you and Dad with a meticulously drafted business plan. I needed a simple $500 signature loan to officially register my LLC and secure my first distressed commercial property. I begged you to co-sign. Dad laughed in my face. He told me I was a failure who was playing a stupid game of Monopoly. He told me to go find a job as a party planner. That same afternoon, he wired $50,000 to Chad's tech startup, a startup that currently has zero revenue and is facing imminent bankruptcy. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I had stripped away every single lie she had ever told herself. I had laid bare the ugly, undeniable truth of her financial and emotional abuse. You did not fund my business, I stated, my voice echoing with finality. You actively tried to destroy it by starving me of resources. I built a 9-figure empire using the resilience I developed while surviving your neglect. Ethel Hospitality Group is entirely mine. My name is the only name on the corporate registry. You are not a silent partner. You are not an investor. You are a liability. Vanessa, please. My mother's voice cracked, the arrogant facade completely shattered. You cannot do this to us. We already told Margaret Vance and the board that we are part owners. If you do not let us bring them to the island, we will be a laughingstock. We will lose our standing at the club. We are your parents. You have to protect us. You chose your family yesterday, I replied, my voice devoid of any sympathy. You chose Chad and Brittany. You chose a melting ice sculpture over walking your eldest daughter down the aisle. I strongly suggest you ask Chad to host the country club board at his corporate headquarters. Oh wait, he cannot do that because he is currently liquidating his office furniture to pay his legal fees. You are a cruel, vindictive girl, my mother screamed into the phone, her true nature finally surfacing. You have always been a monster. We gave you everything, and you are trying to ruin us. I will tell everyone that you are lying. I will tell them you stole that money. You cannot tell them anything, I said quietly, because you are going to be too busy selling your house to cover the second mortgage Dad took out for the baby shower. Do not ever contact me again. Do not invoke my name. And do not ever claim my empire as your own. I reached out and ended the call. The dial tone sounded for a brief second before the line went dead. I let out a long, slow breath, feeling a massive, suffocating weight physically lift off my chest. 10 years of suppressed anger, 10 years of swallowing their insults had just been exercised in less than 5 minutes. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with profound respect and admiration. He did not say a word. He just reached across the table and poured me another cup of coffee. I took a sip, letting the warm liquid soothe my throat. The morning was quiet again. The ocean continued its gentle rhythm against the shore. I looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of absolute clarity and peace. But peace in my family was always a temporary condition. Less than 2 seconds after I disconnected the call with my mother, the phone lit up again. The screen flashed violently, vibrating against the teak table. It was Brittany. I stared at the name on the screen. The golden child. The sister who had orchestrated the entire wedding day sabotage. She was calling back to back relentlessly. I slid my finger across the screen and accepted the call, leaving it on speaker. Before I could even say a single word, a piercing, hysterical wail erupted from the phone. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated panic. "Vanessa, you have to stop this!" Brittany screamed through a series of dramatic, heaving sobs. "You are literally killing my baby. The stress you are putting on our family is causing me to have contractions. You are being a monster. You have to fix this right now, or it will be your fault if I lose this pregnancy." I held the phone slightly away from my ear as Brittany continued to scream. Her voice was shrill and frantic, cutting through the serene, tropical atmosphere of the villa. She was hyperventilating deliberately, taking loud, gasping breaths to simulate a medical emergency. "You are doing this on purpose," she wailed. "You are holding a petty grudge over a baby shower, and the stress is causing me to have actual contractions. If I lose this pregnancy, it will be entirely your fault, Vanessa. You are going to be responsible for destroying my family." I sat back against the outdoor sofa, crossing my legs and maintaining a perfectly steady breathing rhythm. For my entire life, Brittany had used her emotional fragility as a weapon. Whenever she wanted something, she manufactured a crisis. If my parents tried to discipline her, she suddenly felt faint. If she failed a test, she claimed the teacher bullied her to the point of a panic attack. She had weaponized her tears to drain my college fund, and she was weaponizing her unborn child right now to force my hand. "Are you quite finished?" I asked, my tone completely devoid of sympathy. There was a sudden jarring silence on the other end of the line. The fake hyperventilating stopped instantly. Brittany was not used to being challenged when she played the victim card. She expected me to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to immediately ask what I could do to lower her blood pressure. "You are a sociopath," Brittany hissed, her voice dropping the frantic act and settling into a cold, bitter snarl. "You have millions of dollars. You own resorts. You kept it a secret because you are a greedy, selfish person who wanted to watch your own family struggle. But you can fix this right now. Chad just needs one vendor contract. Just one. He said your company, Ethel Hospitality, has an acquisitions budget that could clear his debt by tomorrow morning. You are going to sign his proposal, Vanessa. You are going to sign it right now because family helps family." I reached for my laptop, which was still resting on the teak table. I flipped the screen open and navigated straight back to the encrypted corporate dossier my financial team had prepared regarding Chad's startup. The glowing screen illuminated my face in the fading twilight. "Put Chad on the phone," I commanded. "He is right here," Brittany said, a triumphant note returning to her voice. She clearly thought she had won. She thought her guilt trip had successfully broken my defenses. I heard the rustling of the phone changing hands. "Vanessa," Chad said, his voice attempting to sound smooth and professional, but vibrating with undeniable panic. "Listen, I know we have had our differences, but from one CEO to another, we have a massive opportunity here. My software platform is exactly what Ethel needs to streamline your guest experience. If you push the vendor contract through your accounting department tonight, we can integrate by next quarter. It is a win for both of us." I looked at the financial metrics highlighted in bright red ink across his proposal. "From one CEO to another. Chad, let us review your actual numbers," I said, my voice sharp and clinical. "You currently have a monthly cash burn rate of $250,000. You have zero recurring revenue. Your customer acquisition cost is astronomically high, and your churn rate sits at an abysmal 90% because your software crashes every time a user attempts to log a service request. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Chad had assumed I was just a figurehead, a lucky woman who stumbled into money. He had not anticipated speaking to a ruthless corporate executive who had personally dismantled and reconstructed dozens of failing businesses. You have absolutely no runway left. I continued reading directly from the dossier. Your primary venture capital backers pulled out yesterday morning because you missed 3 consecutive development milestones. You owe your commercial landlord 4 months of back rent. You are not offering me an innovative tech solution, Chad. You are begging me to bail you out of a catastrophic financial failure that you created through your own sheer incompetence. Vanessa, you are looking at outdated projections. Chad stammered, his smooth facade completely disintegrating. Technology requires capital investment up front. You know that. We are just in a pivot phase. If you just give us the initial vendor payment, I can restructure the debt. I will not be authorizing a single cent, I stated with absolute finality. Ethel Hospitality Group does not invest in toxic amateur ventures. Your company is a sinking ship fueled by your own arrogance. You spent the last year leasing luxury cars and buying country club memberships to look like a tech mogul instead of actually coding a functional product. You are officially facing bankruptcy. You owe us! Brittany screamed, grabbing the phone back from her husband. Her voice was shrill, echoing with desperation. You abandoned us today. You made Mom and Dad look like fools in front of the whole country club. You owe our family this money, Vanessa. I do not owe you anything, I replied, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. You made your choice when you planned a catered party on the exact day of my wedding. You chose to prioritize your vanity over our relationship. I suggest you start returning all those expensive baby shower gifts, Brittany. You are going to need the cash when the bank forecloses on your house. I hit the end call button, terminating the connection. I closed the laptop with a sharp snap and set it aside. The silence of the Maldivian night washed over the balcony, replacing the toxic screeching of my family. Liam reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb tracing my knuckles. That was surgical, Liam said, his eyes filled with quiet pride. You completely dismantled them. They dismantled themselves, I replied, taking a deep breath of the warm ocean air. I just held up the mirror. We spent the remainder of our 3-week honeymoon completely disconnected from the chaos unfolding in Chicago. We swam with sea turtles, dined on private sandbanks, and enjoyed the absolute peace of a life unburdened by my family's relentless demands. I did not check my email. I did not look at my social media. I let Chad and Brittany drown in the reality of their own financial ruin, while Liam and I built the foundation of our new life together. But vacations eventually end, and reality always demands to be faced. 3 weeks later, our private car navigated through the chilly, overcast streets of Chicago. The transition from tropical paradise to the gray concrete of the Midwest was jarring, but I felt grounded and ready. I had spent my entire life dreading interactions with my parents. Now I simply viewed them as an unpleasant administrative task that needed to be finalized. The black luxury SUV turned onto our quiet, upscale street in the Gold Coast neighborhood. Liam and I sat in the back seat gathering our coats and travel bags. As the driver pulled up to the curb of our historic brick townhouse, I looked out the tinted window and felt my jaw clench. Sitting on the stone steps of my front porch were my parents, Patricia and Richard. They looked utterly out of place against the elegant backdrop of my home. My father was clutching a thick manila folder against his chest. His usual arrogant posture was replaced by a rigid, nervous tension. My mother sat beside him, wearing her expensive designer coat, clutching her handbag like a shield. They had clearly been waiting in the cold for quite some time, hoping to ambush us the moment we returned. Liam let out a low sigh as he spotted them. Unbelievable, he muttered, unbuckling his seatbelt. They actually showed up here. Do you want the driver to keep going? We can check into a hotel for the night. No, I said, my voice icy and resolute. I am not hiding from them in my own city. Let us get this over with. We stepped out of the car onto the cold pavement. The driver retrieved our luggage from the trunk, while Liam and I walked toward the wrought iron gate protecting the front steps. My parents stood up immediately, pasting on identical strained smiles that looked more like grimaces. "Vanessa, darling," my mother called out, attempting to sound warm and maternal. "Welcome home. We thought we would surprise you. We brought some coffee and bagels to celebrate your return." I looked at the paper coffee cups sitting on the stone ledge. The blatant manipulation was insulting. They skipped my wedding, lied about funding my multi-million-dollar company, demanded a free luxury vacation, and now they thought 2 lukewarm coffees would buy their way into my good graces. "What are you doing on my property?" I asked, ignoring her greeting entirely. I unlocked the iron gate but did not step aside to let them pass. "Now, Vanessa, let us not be hostile," my father Richard said, stepping forward and using his deep, authoritative voice. He always relied on patriarchal intimidation when he wanted to control a situation. "We are here to talk business. We need to have a serious family discussion." "There is no family discussion to be had," I replied, my voice flat. "You made your priorities very clear on my wedding day. You have exactly 1 minute to state your business before I ask you to leave." Richard straightened his shoulders, trying to project dominance. He held out the thick manila folder. "Chad is facing a slight liquidity issue with his company. It is a temporary cash flow problem. He has secured a massive restructuring loan from a private commercial lender, but he needs a guarantor with significant verified assets to co-sign the agreement." I stared at the folder in his hand and then looked directly into his eyes. "You want me to co-sign a loan for the man who sabotaged my wedding? It is the right thing to do." "Vanessa," my father insisted, his tone dripping with unearned authority. "You abandoned this family emotionally. You lied to us about your career and hoarded your wealth while we struggled to support your sister. Co-signing this loan is a necessary step to make amends and prove you still care about this family's legacy." The sheer magnitude of his delusion was staggering. He was actively trying to guilt-trip a woman he had emotionally abused for 3 decades into taking on massive corporate debt for a failing startup. I stepped forward, unlocking the heavy wooden front door of my townhouse. I pushed it open, revealing the expansive grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and imported marble floors. "Come inside," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "Both of you." My parents exchanged a victorious glance, clearly believing their intimidation tactic had worked. They thought I was capitulating. They followed Liam and me into the grand foyer, stepping onto the marble and looking around at the undeniable display of wealth. Liam set our bags by the staircase and stood silently by my side, his arms crossed over his chest, his presence a solid wall of support. I walked over to the console table and picked up my tablet, which I had left charging before the trip. I woke the screen and quickly pulled up the digital property records for Cook County. I had done my own research during the flight home. "You think I abandoned this family emotionally?" I asked, turning to face my father. "You think I owe you financial support to preserve your legacy? Let us take a close look at your legacy, Dad." I turned the tablet screen toward him. Displayed in bright, clear text were the public financial filings for his residential property. "14 months ago, you took out a massive second mortgage on your house," I stated, reading the numbers aloud. "You pulled $400,000 in equity out of your primary residence. You took that money and you funneled it directly into Chad's business accounts to keep his failing company afloat. You also used it to pay for Brittany's country club memberships, her designer maternity clothes, and the ice sculptures at the baby shower you attended instead of my wedding." My father's face drained of all color. He stepped back as if I had physically struck him. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. They had kept their financial ruin a deeply guarded secret, terrified of losing their social standing among their elite friends. "You have 0 equity left," I continued, stepping closer to them, the cold marble echoing under my boots. "Your retirement accounts are entirely depleted. Chad's company is not facing a slight liquidity issue. It is completely bankrupt and he is dragging you down with him. You are standing in my foyer trying to bully me into co-signing a loan because you are absolutely broke." "You ungrateful little brat!" my mother shrieked, her carefully maintained country club facade completely shattering. "We gave you everything. We raised you. You have millions of dollars and you are going to let your own parents lose their home." You lost your own home, Patricia, I replied, refusing to call her mom. You gambled your entire life on the golden child and you lost. I will not attach my pristine corporate credit to your catastrophic failures. My mother lunged forward, her face contorted with pure rage. She raised her hand, aiming a vicious slap directly at my face. Before she could even make contact, Liam stepped seamlessly between us. He caught my mother's wrist in midair, his grip firm and unyielding. He did not hurt her, but he held her arm with enough strength to completely halt her momentum. Do not ever attempt to touch my wife again, Liam said, his voice dangerously low, dropping an octave with protective fury. He released her wrist, pushing her hand back toward her. My mother stumbled backward, clutching her arm and looking at Liam with wide, terrified eyes. She had never been physically confronted in her life. She was used to screaming and getting exactly what she wanted. I looked at the two people who had brought me into this world. They looked small, pathetic, and utterly powerless, standing in the grand foyer of the empire I had built without them. You have exactly 30 seconds to vacate my property, I said, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. If you are not outside that gate before the timer runs out, I am calling the Chicago police and having you formally trespassed. Vanessa, please, my father begged, his arrogant posture collapsing into genuine panic. If Chad does not get this loan, the bank is foreclosing on our house next month. We will have nowhere to go. 20 seconds, I replied, pulling my cell phone out of my pocket and dialing the first 2 digits of the emergency number. My father looked at my cold, unyielding expression and finally realized that the obedient, desperate daughter he used to control was truly dead. He grabbed my mother by the arm, practically dragging her toward the heavy wooden door. They stumbled out onto the stone porch, retreating into the cold Chicago afternoon. I stepped forward and slammed the door shut, driving the heavy deadbolt into place with a loud, satisfying click. I leaned against the door, taking a deep, shaky breath. Liam walked over and wrapped his arms around me, pulling my back against his chest and resting his chin on the top of my head. We stood there in the quiet foyer, letting the adrenaline slowly drain from our systems. It is over, I whispered, closing my eyes. Not quite, Liam replied softly. Look at your phone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was vibrating constantly. I opened my social media applications. While my parents had been ambushing me on my front porch, Brittany had launched a desperate, coordinated retaliation online. Unable to accept her impending financial ruin, Brittany had posted a heavily edited, tearful video to all of her social media platforms. She was sitting in her lavish nursery, crying hysterically into the camera. She claimed that her newly wealthy elitist sister was trying to ruin her family out of petty jealousy over a baby shower. She spun a fabricated tale about how I was using my corporate wealth to deliberately bankrupt her husband and force her unborn child onto the streets. The video was rapidly gaining traction within our local Chicago social circles. It was being shared, commented on, and discussed by the very people who operated in my industry. My toxic family thought they had successfully backed me into a corner by threatening my professional reputation. I locked my phone screen, a cold, calculating smile forming on my lips. I walked over to the mail pile that had accumulated on the console table during our honeymoon. Sitting right on top was a thick premium envelope embossed with gold foil. It was a formal invitation to the Chicago Hospitality Gala, the most prestigious corporate event of the year. It was the exact event where Chad had somehow managed to secure a spot as a keynote speaker, desperately hoping to pitch his non-existent tech integration to the city's elite investors. I picked up the heavy cardstock invitation and turned it over in my hands. I looked at Liam, my smile sharpening into something dangerous. I need you to call my stylist, I told my husband, tossing the invitation back onto the marble table. Tell her I need something absolutely unforgettable. We are going to a gala. The morning after Brittany uploaded her tearful masterpiece, my corporate public relations director was waiting in my glass-walled office before I even arrived. Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, holding a tablet tightly against his chest. His expression was a mixture of professional concern and absolute bewilderment. I set my briefcase on the desk and poured myself a cup of black coffee from the carafe. Good morning, Marcus, I said, taking a slow sip. I assume you have seen my sister's audition tape for the local daytime soap operas. Marcus placed the tablet on my desk and tapped the screen. The video had already amassed over 500,000 views across various platforms. Brittany was a master of digital manipulation. She had perfectly angled the camera to highlight her pregnant belly while she sat on the floor of her nursery clutching a tiny stuffed bear. She sobbed directly into the lens, spinning a wildly fabricated story about how her newly wealthy, elitist sister was using billions of dollars in corporate backing to deliberately bankrupt her hardworking husband. She painted Chad as a visionary tech underdog being crushed by a tyrannical hospitality mogul simply because of a petty misunderstanding over a baby shower. It is gaining serious traction in the local social circles, Vanessa Marcus said, his voice tight with anxiety. The country club crowd is eating it up. A few mid-tier hospitality blogs have picked up the story, framing it as a David and Goliath situation. They are painting you as a ruthless corporate raider attacking your own family. I have drawn up a cease and desist letter. Our legal team is ready to file a defamation suit by noon. I also have a draft of a public statement refuting her claims and highlighting your philanthropic work to soften your image. We need to kill this narrative immediately before it impacts our upcoming acquisitions. I looked at the paused image of my sister's tear-stained face on the tablet. She looked so incredibly fragile and innocent. It was the exact same expression she used when she was 16 and convinced my parents that I had stolen her designer watch, a watch she had actually pawned to buy concert tickets. My parents had grounded me for a month without a shred of proof. Brittany knew exactly how to play the victim, and she thought the entire world would coddle her just like our parents did. Tear up the cease and desist, I commanded, sliding the tablet back to Marcus. Do not issue a public statement. Do not engage with the media. We are going to do absolutely nothing. Marcus stared at me as if I had completely lost my mind. Vanessa, this is a coordinated smear campaign. If we do not respond, it looks like an admission of guilt. Chad is actually gaining sympathy traction from amateur angel investors who think he is being bullied. He is using this video to leverage meetings. I smiled a slow, calculated smile. That is exactly what I want him to do, Marcus. I want his ego inflated to the absolute maximum capacity. I want him to feel untouchable. If we send a cease and desist right now, it proves to my toxic family that they have successfully managed to intimidate me. They will think they have found my weakness. They want a public fight because it validates their relevance. I refuse to give them that power. I sat down in my leather executive chair and opened my laptop. My personal cell phone, which was sitting next to my keyboard, buzzed. The screen lit up with a text message from my mother, Patricia. I unlocked the phone and read the message aloud so Marcus could hear the sheer audacity of my family's extortion strategy. See what happens when you turn your back on your own blood. My mother wrote her text, dripping with smug satisfaction. Brittany is completely heartbroken, but she is willing to be the bigger person. She will take the video down and issue a public apology, stating it was a pregnancy hormone-induced misunderstanding. All you have to do is sign the vendor contract for Chad's software today. You have until 5 o'clock before she does an exclusive interview with a local lifestyle magazine. Do the right thing, Vanessa. Save your reputation and save your family. I tossed the phone onto the desk. They are trying to extort a multi-million-dollar vendor contract out of a Fortune 500 company using a crying pregnant woman on social media, I stated, marveling at the utter stupidity of their plan. It is almost poetic how little they understand about the corporate world. Marcus looked at the phone and shook his head. So we just let them hold this over us? No, I replied, my fingers flying across my keyboard as I logged into my encrypted email server. We let them think they have backed me into a corner. We let them bask in their false victory for exactly 5 days. I pulled up the digital invitation I had received over the weekend. It was the official guest portal for the Chicago Hospitality Gala. The event was the crown jewel of the city's corporate social calendar. Every major hotelier, venture capitalist, and real estate developer in the Midwest would be in attendance. It was a room filled with billionaires, visionaries, and the absolute apex of the financial food chain. I navigated to the event schedule. There it was, right in the middle of the evening's programming. Chad was listed as a featured speaker on a panel titled, the future of hospitality technology. He had undoubtedly begged, borrowed, and lied his way onto that stage, desperate to pitch his vaporware startup to a room full of deep pockets. He thought the sympathy generated by Britney's video would make him a prime target for investment. He thought he was walking into a room full of allies. Marcus, I said, pointing to the screen. Call the gala organizers. Inform them that the CEO of Ethel Hospitality Group will be attending. I want a VIP table directly in the front row. I want it centered perfectly so the speakers on stage have absolutely no choice but to look me in the eye. Marcus read the screen, and a slow realization dawned on his face. The panic faded, replaced by the sharp, predatory instinct of a seasoned public relations director. He understood the assignment. I will have the table secured within the hour, he said, a wicked grin spreading across his face. For the next 5 days, I operated in total digital silence. I did not respond to my mother's extortion attempts. I ignored Brittany's escalating threats as her artificial deadline came and went. Chad grew increasingly arrogant, texting Liam to brag about how my silence was proof that I was too terrified to face the public backlash. He boasted that his inbox was flooded with inquiries from sympathetic investors who wanted to hear his keynote speech at the upcoming gala. He genuinely believed he had won. He believed the golden child and the tech genius had successfully conquered the rebellious scapegoat. When Saturday evening arrived, the atmosphere in my townhouse was electric. This was not just another corporate event. This was the execution block. My stylist had arrived 3 hours earlier bearing garment bags filled with options. She knew I needed something that projected absolute, uncompromising power. We bypassed the safe corporate silhouettes and the understated evening gowns. Instead, I stepped into a custom-tailored floor-length gown in a shade of deep oxblood red. It was structured, architectural, and entirely flawless. The neckline was sharp, the tailoring was aggressive, and the slit up the side allowed for precise, confident movement. I paired it with diamond drop earrings that caught the light like shattered glass and a pair of black stiletto heels that sounded like gunshots on the hardwood floor. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The girl who had cried in her childhood bedroom, the teenager whose college fund was stolen, the bride who stood alone at the altar were all completely gone. The woman staring back at me was a titan. Liam walked into the master's suite wearing a razor-sharp midnight blue tuxedo. He stopped dead in his tracks, letting out a low breath of pure appreciation. He walked up behind me, resting his hands on my waist and looking at our reflection together in the glass. "You look like you are about to dismantle an entire bloodline," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my bare shoulder. "That is exactly what is on the itinerary tonight," I replied, turning to face him. "Chad thinks he is walking into a room full of gullible investors who feel sorry for him. He thinks I am hiding in my house, too ashamed of Britney's video to show my face in high society. I am going to let him step up to that microphone. I am going to let him open his mouth, and then I'm going to burn his entire fraudulent kingdom to the ground." The black armored town car was waiting for us at the curb. The drive to the venue was silent, filled with the heavy thrum of anticipation. The Chicago night was crisp and clear, the city lights reflecting off the dark surface of the river. We pulled up to the grand entrance of the historic hotel hosting the gala. A massive crowd of industry professionals, journalists, and socialites milled around the red carpet. The flashing lights of the press photographers illuminated the entrance as the driver opened my door. I stepped out onto the pavement, the cold air hitting my skin. The moment the crowd registered my face, a noticeable ripple of whispers tore through the attendees. They recognized me. Half of them recognized me as the elusive billionaire CEO of Ethel Resorts. The other half recognized me as the cruel elitist sister from Britney's viral tear-stained video. I could feel their eyes tracking my every movement. I could hear the muted gasps and the urgent murmurs. They were waiting to see if I would shy away from the cameras, if I would keep my head down and rush past the press line in shame. Instead, I stopped right in the middle of the carpet. I linked my arm through Liam's, and I looked directly into the flashing lenses of the cameras. I offered them a cold, brilliant smile that dared anyone to question my presence. I was not a victim seeking pity. And I was certainly not a villain hiding from the consequences of a smear campaign. I was the absolute apex predator in this environment. "Let us go find our seats," I said to Liam, my voice steady and completely unbothered by the stares of the Chicago elite. The keynote speaker is going to need an attentive audience. We walked through the heavy gilded doors of the ballroom, stepping directly into the lion's den. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a golden glow over the hundreds of round tables draped in heavy velvet. At the very front of the room, a massive illuminated stage waited for the speakers. And standing just off to the side of the stage, sipping a glass of bourbon and laughing with a group of venture capitalists was Chad. He looked arrogant. He looked victorious. He was completely oblivious to the fact that the architect of his total destruction had just walked through the front doors. The ballroom of the historic hotel was a masterclass in gilded excess. Towering floral arrangements of white orchids and silver branches commanded the center of every velvet-draped table. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the low thrum of high-stakes networking. This was an ecosystem built entirely on perception. Wealth here was not just about the numbers in a bank account, it was about proximity access and the illusion of invincibility. Liam guided me through the parting sea of attendees. The silence that tracked my movement was palpable. I could feel the questioning stares burning into the back of my oxblood gown. Half the room was trying to reconcile the image of the weeping pregnant woman from the viral video with the uncompromising reality of the billionaire CEO striding past them. I did not break my gaze. I did not offer polite nods. I simply moved toward the front of the room, claiming the space that was rightfully mine. Our reserved table was situated exactly where my public relations director had promised. It was positioned dead center, directly in front of the illuminated stage, a prime piece of real estate reserved only for the industry apex predators. I took my seat crossing my legs and accepting a glass of sparkling water from a hovering waiter. Liam sat beside me, his presence a calming anchor in the midst of the swirling corporate theater. I scanned the room with predatory focus, mapping the power dynamics playing out around the perimeter. My eyes locked onto the target immediately. Chad was stationed near the carved mahogany bar, desperately holding court with a specific cluster of older men in bespoke suits. Even from 30 feet away, his desperation was practically radiating off him in waves. He was smiling too widely, laughing a fraction of a second too late, and gesturing with frantic, erratic movements. He was gripping his glass of bourbon so tightly his knuckles were white. He was a drowning man trying to convince the lifeguards that he was actually giving swimming lessons. I recognized the men he had managed to corner. They were not just casual attendees. They were Harrison Cole and David Pierce, two of the most notoriously ruthless venture capitalists in the Midwest. They managed billions in private equity, and they were famous for aggressively acquiring distressed tech assets. Chad was swinging for the absolute fences. If he could convince Cole and Pierce to inject a lifeline of capital into his bankrupt software company, he could miraculously survive the financial ruin he had brought upon himself and my parents. "He is sweating," Liam observed, leaning in close so his voice would not carry over the background music. "He keeps wiping his forehead with his cocktail napkin. He knows his runway is entirely gone. He is pitching for his life right now." I watched Chad lean forward, invading Harrison Cole's personal space in an attempt to project dominance. "He is trying to leverage the video." I replied, my voice low and calculated. "He thinks the smear campaign generated enough sympathetic buzz to make him look like a martyr. But sympathy does not secure seven-figure venture capital investments. Greed does. He needs something tangible to offer them. He needs a hook." I watched the body language of the investors shift. David Pierce crossed his arms over his chest, a universal sign of skepticism. Harrison Cole checked his luxury watch. They were losing interest. Chad's window of opportunity was rapidly closing, and he knew it. I saw the exact moment panic overrode his common sense. His posture stiffened, his chest puffed out, and he began speaking with a sudden renewed ferocity. He was deploying his final, desperate strategy. "It is time," I said, standing up slowly from my chair. I handed my glass to Liam. "Hold the table. I need to go listen to this pitch." I glided away from this VIP section, navigating the perimeter of the ballroom with deliberate, silent grace. The oxblood silk of my gown moved like liquid behind me. I did not approach Chad directly from the front. Instead, I walked a wide arc, utilizing the dense crowds and the towering floral pillars to mask my approach. I moved like a shark, cutting through the dark water circling the prey before the strike. As I drew closer, the ambient noise of the ballroom faded, and the frantic tenor of Chad's voice became distinct. He was projecting loudly intentionally, trying to sound like a man who held the keys to the kingdom. I positioned myself just behind his right shoulder, slipping seamlessly into the blind spot of his peripheral vision. The two venture capitalists, Harrison Cole and David Pierce, had a direct line of sight to me. I raised a single finger to my lips, giving them a subtle commanding signal to remain completely silent. Cole's eyes widened slightly in recognition. Pierce's rigid posture immediately relaxed into a stance of fascinated amusement. These men were apex predators themselves. They recognized a slaughter when they saw one, and they were more than happy to watch the execution play out. They kept their eyes fixed on Chad, allowing him to continue his disastrous performance. "You gentlemen have to look at the larger market trajectory," Chad was saying, his voice vibrating with artificial confidence. "The hospitality sector is incredibly antiquated. They are desperate for modernization. They are begging for the kind of automated integration my platform provides. And frankly, I have the ultimate insider advantage." Chad took a sip of his bourbon, attempting to look nonchalant, but I could see the tremor in his hand. "I am not just building software, gentlemen. I am building an exclusive ecosystem." Chad continued, lying with such conviction, it was almost impressive. "You have obviously seen the recent press regarding Ethel Island Resort. It is the most aggressive luxury acquisition of the year. What the financial blogs do not know yet is the operational strategy behind closed doors. The founder of Ethel Hospitality Group is my sister-in-law." He paused, waiting for the venture capitalist to react. Cole and Pierce maintained their neutral expressions, but their eyes darted briefly to me, standing perfectly still in the shadows behind Chad. "It is a family enterprise," Chad lied smoothly, warming up to his own fabricated narrative. "My wife and I are deeply embedded in the Ethel corporate structure. In fact, my sister-in-law relies heavily on my expertise. She is brilliant with real estate, but she is completely lost when it comes to digital infrastructure. I am currently advising her entire executive board on their global expansion." The sheer audacity of the lie sent a shockwave of cold fury through my veins. But I kept my face arranged in a mask of pleasant, terrifying serenity. He was taking credit for my empire. He was using the very company he had mocked for years to save his own pathetic skin. "We are finalizing a massive partnership," Chad boasted, his voice rising over the music. "My software platform is going to be the exclusive integrated concierge service for every single Ethel property worldwide. We are talking about a merger of hospitality and tech that will completely monopolize the luxury sector. If you come in on this bridge funding round right now, you are not just investing in a startup, you are buying a backdoor ticket into the Ethel hospitality empire. We are practically signing the vendor contracts tomorrow morning. It is a guaranteed return on investment." Chad finished his pitch with a smug, self-satisfied smile. He took another drink of his bourbon, clearly believing he had just delivered the performance of a lifetime. He thought he had successfully weaponized my blood, sweat, and tears to secure his own financial salvation. He believed his lies were completely bulletproof in this room. David Pierce looked directly at me over Chad's shoulder. A slow, dangerous smile spread across the investor's face. "That is a fascinating proposition," Chad Pierce said, his tone dripping with subtle irony. "A guaranteed return on investment is a bold promise, especially involving a brand as aggressively guarded as Ethel Hospitality. Tell me, does your sister-in-law share your enthusiastic vision for this impending merger?" Chad laughed, a loud, booming sound that echoed artificially over the hum of the crowd. "Absolutely. We are completely aligned. In fact, we are tighter than ever. Family always prioritizes family and business. My sister-in-law would not dream of taking Ethel global without my software driving the ship." I took one slow, deliberate step forward, closing the final distance between us. The heavy silk of my gown brushed against the back of his tuxedo jacket. I leaned in close, so close that my lips were mere inches from his ear. My voice was a soft, lethal whisper that cut through his arrogant laughter like a serrated blade. "Is that right, Chad?" The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Chad froze, completely paralyzed, as if lightning had struck the marble floor beneath his feet. The smug smile vanished from his face, replaced by a rigid mask of sheer, visceral terror. The glass of bourbon in his hand tilted dangerously, the amber liquid sloshing against the rim. He recognized the voice immediately. For 2 agonizing seconds he did not move. He stood suspended in the horrifying realization that the entire foundation of his lies had just crumbled beneath his feet. He had spun his fraudulent web while standing directly in front of the spider. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Chad turned around to face me. I looked him dead in the eyes, my expression radiating pure, absolute zero hostility. I did not blink. I did not break contact. I let him see exactly who he was dealing with. Not the quiet scapegoat he had bullied for years. Not the event planner he had dismissed at Sunday dinners. He was staring directly into the eyes of the billionaire CEO whose name he had just attempted to steal, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was not walking out of this ballroom alive. "Is that right, Chad?" The sheer volume of Chad's boast had carried his voice over the low hum of the ballroom. But my whispered response, despite its quiet tone, cut through the surrounding space with surgical precision. Harrison Cole and David Pierce, the 2 venture capitalists who held Chad's financial survival in their hands, immediately straightened their posture. They sensed the shift in the power dynamic before Chad even turned around. Chad pivoted slowly, the arrogant smirk wiping from his face the moment his eyes locked onto mine. The bourbon sloshed in his glass, nearly spilling onto his expensive tuxedo. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Vanessa." He finally managed, his voice tight and breathless. "What are you doing here?" "I am attending the gala, Chad," I replied, my voice ringing out clearly in the sudden silence of our immediate circle. "I received the invitation shortly after I returned from the Maldives. You remember the Maldives, do you not? The location of the $20,000 a night villa you were desperately messaging me about while you were supposed to be advising my acquisitions team." David Pierce let out a sharp bark of laughter, raising his glass. "Well, this is a fascinating turn of events. Chad here was just telling us about the exclusive vendor contract he is finalizing with Ethel Hospitality. He claims it is a family enterprise." I looked directly at Pierce. "There is no vendor contract, Mr. Pierce. There has never been a vendor contract. Ethel Hospitality Group has absolutely no affiliation with Chad's company. In fact, I officially rejected his business proposal less than 2 weeks ago, citing his alarming burn rate, his non-existent recurring revenue, and his massive outstanding debt. I would strongly advise against investing a single cent into his operation." Chad's face turned a mottled shade of red. Panic and rage warred in his eyes. He had been backed into a corner in front of the very people he needed to save him. Instead of retreating, he chose to attack. "You are lying!" Chad shouted, his voice carrying across the ballroom, causing several heads to turn. "She is lying, gentlemen. She is just bitter because we had a family disagreement. She is trying to ruin my business out of petty jealousy because my wife had a medical emergency on her wedding day, and the family had to support us instead of her." The accusation hung in the air. Chad believed that invoking the wedding drama would discredit me, painting me as an emotional, unstable woman seeking revenge. He thought he could manipulate the narrative just as he and Brittany had done on social media. I did not raise my voice. I simply opened my metallic clutch and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed brightly in the dim light of the ballroom. I unlocked it and navigated to the family group chat, the digital graveyard of my former life. "A medical emergency," I repeated, holding the phone up so Cole and Pierce could clearly see the screen. "This is the text message my father sent me exactly 15 minutes before I was scheduled to walk down the aisle. It explicitly states that Chad orchestrated a surprise baby shower at the Oak Brook Country Club, and that the entire family was choosing to attend the shower instead of my wedding." It concludes with the phrase, "Have a great day." Harrison Cole leaned in close, reading the text message. His jaw tightened in a grimace of pure disgust. He looked at Chad, his expression shifting from amusement to cold contempt. "You skipped her wedding for a baby shower," Cole stated flatly. "And now you are attempting to solicit venture capital by falsely claiming a strategic partnership with her company. That is not just unethical, Chad, that is bordering on criminal fraud." Chad took a step back, his bravado shattering completely. "Harrison, please let me explain," he stammered, his hands trembling. "My company is solvent. We just need a bridge loan." "Is it solvent, Chad?" I interjected, refusing to let him breathe. "Because according to the financial records you sent to my acquisitions team, you owe your commercial landlord 4 months of back rent. Your primary investors pulled out days ago. And my father Richard, who is currently sitting at table 12 right over there, secretly took out a second mortgage on his primary residence to fund your failing operation." The collective gasp from the surrounding crowd signaled that my words had landed with devastating impact. By this point, several other investors and gala attendees had gathered around, drawn by the escalating confrontation. The murmurs rippled outward, carrying the details of Chad's financial ruin and my family's betrayal across the ballroom. "You have no right," Chad screamed, lunging forward, his fists clenched. "You are ruining my life." Before he could close the distance, 2 massive security guards materialized, seemingly out of thin air. They stepped between us, their sheer physical presence halting Chad's aggressive advance. "Sir, we need you to step back," one of the guards commanded, his voice brokering no argument. "You are causing a disturbance. We are going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." Chad struggled against the guards, his face twisted into a mask of humiliated fury. He shouted incoherent threats as they firmly escorted him toward the exit, dragging him away from his final desperate chance at salvation. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as the supposed tech visionary was physically removed from the gala. I turned my attention to table 12, where my parents Patricia and Richard were seated. They were frozen in their chairs, staring at me with expressions of sheer, unadulterated horror. The elite social circle they had sacrificed everything to impress was now staring at them, whispering behind raised hands. Their meticulously crafted facade of wealth and prestige was shattered beyond repair. They were ruined. I offered them a single chilling smile before turning back to Liam, who was watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. The execution was complete. The Monday following the gala, the fallout was swift and absolute. The gossip from the ballroom had saturated the Chicago financial sector before the weekend was even over. Chad's remaining minor investors, spooked by the public revelation of his impending bankruptcy and fraudulent solicitation, immediately pulled their funding. The software company that had consumed my parents' retirement savings officially folded its doors, locked by the commercial landlord. The destruction of Chad's business triggered a catastrophic domino effect for my parents. With no viable income stream and a massive second mortgage hanging over their heads, Richard and Patricia could no longer sustain the illusion of wealth. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on their historic Gold Coast townhouse, forcing them to put the property on the market in a desperate bid to cover their staggering debts. The country club friends they had prized above their own daughter quickly distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with the newly destitute. The social isolation was a far more punishing consequence than the financial ruin. They had traded my love for proximity to power, and now they had neither. And then came the inevitable conclusion to the saga of the Golden Child. Exactly 2 weeks after the gala, my corporate receptionist buzzed my office line. "Ms. Vanessa, your sister is in the lobby." The receptionist announced, her tone carefully neutral. "She is insisting she needs to speak with you. She says it is a family emergency." I leaned back in my executive chair, steepling my fingers. "Send her up," I instructed. Brittany entered my office looking absolutely nothing like the arrogant influencer who had weaponized her pregnancy just a month ago. Her designer clothes looked rumpled, and her eyes were red and swollen. The aura of entitlement had vanished, replaced by the stark, desperate reality of a woman who had lost her entire safety net. Vanessa, Brittany choked out, stopping a few feet from my desk. "We lost everything. Chad's company is gone. The bank is taking Mom and Dad's house. Chad is facing legal action from his investors. We cannot even afford the rent on our apartment. She gripped the edge of my mahogany desk, her knuckles white. You have to help us, Vanessa. Please. I will do anything. I can work for you. You can give us a loan. Just please, you are my sister. You cannot let my baby grow up like this. I looked at her, the woman who had demanded a $3,000 nursery set as an apology for her own malicious behavior. I felt absolutely no pity. I folded my hands on the desk. You made your choice on my wedding day, Brittany. I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You chose to prioritize your vanity and Chad's delusions of grandeur over our relationship. You orchestrated a spectacle to humiliate me, and you reveled in my presumed failure. But Vanessa, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I was stressed. I was not thinking clearly. You were thinking perfectly clearly, I corrected. You thought I was powerless. You thought you could break me, and that I would just accept it because I always had. But you were wrong. I am not your scapegoat anymore, and I am certainly not your bank. I stood up, terminating the meeting. You have your baby shower gifts, Brittany. I suggest you start selling them. I pressed the button on my intercom. Security, please escort my sister out of the building. She will not be returning. Brittany collapsed into hysterical sobs as the security guards gently but firmly guided her out of my office. I did not watch her leave. I turned back to the stunning view of the Chicago skyline, the city I had conquered on my own terms. 6 months later, the crisp autumn air signaled the arrival of Thanksgiving. Liam and I hosted a lavish dinner at our townhouse. The long dining table was crowded with people. My college roommate, who had wiped away my tears on my wedding day, sat across from my lead acquisition manager. Mentors, colleagues, and friends filled the room with genuine laughter and unconditional warmth. This was my family. As Liam stood up to carve the turkey, he caught my eye from across the table. He smiled the same grounding, proud smile that had carried me down the aisle. I looked around the room, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. The 12 empty chairs at my wedding had felt like a devastating betrayal in the moment. But looking back, I realized they were actually the greatest gift I had ever received. They were the universe clearing out the toxic debris to make room for my real life. I had finally stopped trying to earn a place at their table and had built my own empire instead. The absolute silence of my corporate office was a stark contrast to the financial noise currently destroying my family across the city. It had been exactly 14 days since the gala. 14 days since Chad's fragile house of cards had completely collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. My father and mother were in the process of liquidating their remaining assets, frantically trying to secure a cramped 2-bedroom apartment out in the distant suburbs before the bank officially padlocked the doors of their historic Gold Coast townhouse. Their country club memberships were revoked. Their calls to wealthy friends went unanswered. They were experiencing the exact isolation they had subjected me to for 33 years. I was reviewing the final architectural blueprints for a new eco-resort in Fiji when my desk phone chimed. It was David, my executive assistant. Madam CEO. David said, his voice perfectly modulated and professional. I apologize for the interruption, but there is a woman in the main lobby demanding to see you. She bypasses the guest registry and is currently refusing to leave. She claims she is your sister and says it is a matter of life and death. I leaned back in my leather chair, setting my gold fountain pen down on the polished mahogany desk. The time had finally come. The golden child, having exhausted every other possible avenue of salvation, was finally forced to grovel at the feet of the scapegoat. Send her up, David, I instructed, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. Have security escort her to my floor, but do not offer her a beverage or a seat in the waiting area. Bring her directly into my office. I stood up and smoothed the skirt of my tailored charcoal suit. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. The water was a dark, churning gray, reflecting the incoming winter weather. I did not feel any anxiety or dread. I only felt the cold, calculated readiness of a business owner preparing to terminate a bad contract. The heavy glass doors of my office swung open. Brittany stumbled inside, looking absolutely unrecognizable. The perfectly curated influencer who had weaponized her pregnancy on a viral video just weeks ago was completely gone. In her place stood a desperate, terrified woman, stripped of every ounce of her unearned arrogance. She was wearing a designer trench coat that looked slept in, and her signature blonde hair was pulled into a messy, tangled knot. Her face was pale, devoid of the expensive makeup she usually wore like armor, and her eyes were red and swollen from days of continuous crying. "Vanessa!" She choked out, her voice cracking as the heavy doors clicked shut behind her. She stopped a few feet from my desk, looking around the massive executive suite with wide, terrified eyes. The sheer scale of my wealth, the undeniable physical proof of my empire seemed to finally register in her mind. She realized how thoroughly she had underestimated me her entire life. I did not offer her a chair. I did not step out from behind my desk. I stood tall and completely still, forcing her to bridge the emotional distance herself. "We lost everything," Vanessa Brittany sobbed, taking a hesitant step forward. Her hands trembled as she clutched the lapels of her coat over her pregnant belly. "Chad's investors are gone. They are suing him for fraud because of the lies he told at the gala. The bank froze our accounts this morning. We cannot even buy groceries. We are completely broke." I maintained direct eye contact, refusing to offer even a fraction of an inch of sympathy. "Mom and Dad cannot help us," she continued, her words tumbling out in a frantic, hysterical rush. "They are selling the house. They are moving into a tiny, cheap apartment, and they told me they do not have a single dollar left to spare. You have to help me, Vanessa. You are a billionaire. You have more money than you could ever spend. Please, I will do anything. I will work for you. You can give us a loan. I will sign whatever you want. Just please do not let my baby grow up on the streets. You are my sister." The audacity of her plea was staggering. After a lifetime of treating me like dirt, after deliberately orchestrating the most painful betrayal on my wedding day, she still believed that her status as my sister entitled her to my resources. She thought the biological tie between us was a magical key that could unlock my vault whenever she was desperate enough. I placed my hands flat on the cool surface of my mahogany desk. My voice, when I finally spoke, was sharp and lethal, cutting through her frantic sobbing like a scalpel. "You made your choice on my wedding day, Brittany." She flinched as if I had physically struck her. The tears stopped falling, replaced by a look of dawning horror as she realized I was not going to save her. "You planned a catered baby shower with the sole intention of ensuring I stood at the altar completely alone," I said, articulating every single word with brutal precision. "You wanted to break my heart because you could not stand the thought of me having one single day of happiness that did not center around you. You and Chad mocked my career. You drained the college fund that I worked double shifts to build. You spent your entire life stepping on my neck to elevate yourself." But Vanessa, I was stressed. She pleaded, taking another step forward, reaching her hand out toward my desk. "I was not thinking clearly. I was influenced by Mom and Dad." "You were thinking perfectly clearly," I corrected, rejecting her weak attempt to shift the blame. "You made a calculated, malicious decision to hurt me. You thought I was weak. You thought I would call you crying and begging for an explanation. You never expected that I would simply close the door and walk away. I am not your scapegoat anymore, Brittany, and I am absolutely not your personal bank account." I reached out and pressed the silver button on my intercom system. "David, please send security in." I requested, my eyes never leaving Brittany's horrified face. "You cannot do this to me!" Brittany screamed, her voice turning shrill and frantic as the reality of her total ruin crashed down upon her. "You are a monster, Vanessa. You are going to let your own niece or nephew suffer because of a stupid party." I leaned forward, resting my weight on my hands. "You have your baby shower gifts, Brittany," I suggested, my tone entirely devoid of pity. "I suggest you start selling them. You might be able to afford a security deposit on a rental apartment if you pawn the custom ice sculpture trays." Two broad-shouldered security guards entered the office, stepping smoothly to either side of my sister. They did not touch her, but their presence was an undeniable command. "Ma'am, it is time to leave the building," the taller guard said, gesturing toward the open doors. Brittany let out a loud, gut-wrenching sob, but she did not fight them. The fight had been completely drained out of her. She turned and walked out of my office, her shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. I watched the heavy glass doors close behind her, sealing off the toxicity of my past forever. I sat back down in my chair, picked up my gold fountain pen, and returned to my architectural blueprints. The tumor had been successfully excised. 6 months later, the brutal Chicago winter had given way to a crisp, bright autumn. The last Thursday of November arrived, bringing with it the warm, golden light of Thanksgiving. Liam and I hosted the dinner at our sprawling, historic townhouse in the Gold Coast. The air inside our home was thick with the rich, savory scents of roasting turkey, caramelized root vegetables, and warm cinnamon spice. The fireplaces crackled cheerfully, casting a beautiful, flickering glow over the polished hardwood floors. Our massive formal dining table was set for 24 people. I stood at the head of the table, adjusting a crystal wineglass and taking in the scene before me. The room was loud, filled with the joyous, booming laughter of people who genuinely cared for one another. To my right sat my college roommate, the woman who had held my hand in the bridal suite and validated my worth when my family abandoned me. Next to her was my lead acquisitions director, trading stories with Liam's parents, who had flown in from the coast to spend the holiday with us. Down the table were industry mentors, trusted colleagues, and loyal friends who had stood by my side through every late night, every risky investment, and every personal triumph. This was my family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I had actively chosen. Liam walked up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist and pressing a warm kiss to my cheek. He handed me a glass of rich red wine. "Look at what you built," he murmured, his voice filled with overwhelming pride. "A hospitality empire, and a home completely filled with love. Not a single toxic person in sight." I leaned back against his chest, looking down the length of the long, beautifully decorated table. I thought back to my wedding day exactly 1 year ago. I remembered the visceral, stinging pain of staring at those 12 empty chairs in the front row of the venue. I remembered the feeling of utter rejection, the cold realization that my blood relatives did not value my existence. But standing here now, surrounded by the warmth and laughter of my true, chosen family, I realized that those 12 empty chairs were not a curse. They were the greatest, most profound gift the universe could have ever given me. My toxic parents and my manipulative sister had intentionally removed themselves from my life, clearing out the debris so I could finally build a reality based on mutual respect and unconditional support. I had stopped trying to earn a place at their table, and instead I had built my own. Liam raised his glass, tapping it gently against mine. "To us," he said. I smiled, feeling a deep, absolute peace settle over my heart. To us, I agreed. I took a sip of the wine, turning my attention back to the beautiful, chaotic joy of my real family. The past was completely behind me, and the future was entirely mine. Society always teaches us that blood ties are a sacred duty, but the truth is, no one has the right to exploit you just because you share the same blood. For 33 years, I endured injustice and longed for recognition that would never come from my own family. They scorned my efforts to siphon off my assets and cruelly abandoned me on the most important day of my life. But the moment I saw 12 empty chairs in the church, I didn't break down. Cutting ties with toxic people isn't revenge, but a courageous step towards self-respect and self-protection. You don't owe anyone forgiveness if they haven't regretted the hurt they caused. My family's harsh rejection, which once made me feel like I had lost everything, was actually the greatest gift the universe could give me. It cleaned away the toxic garbage, creating invaluable space for me to freely build my own empire and find people who truly appreciate me. A true family isn't necessarily about blood ties. It's about those who stand by you, celebrating victories together and never leaving when storms come. Don't try to buy a seat at a table where you're merely a tool. Build your own table. Life is short, so be brave and move forward to protect your own peace. Share this journey with me now,